Conan O'Brien finally broke his silence about that infamous night, the one where Rob Reiner and his son Nick clashed right in front of everyone at Conan's Christmas party. "I saw Nick screaming straight into his father's face with my own eyes," Conan revealed, describing a scene that started as awkward but ended up exposing something much darker than anyone realized. At first, no one could tell what was unfolding. People thought it was just an uncomfortable family argument. Tense, sure, but harmless. Nobody knew they were watching the start of something collapsing right before them.
I look back on that whole thing, which was, craziness, but, and I don't like to talk about it much, and I'll tell you why.
Yeah, why?
I don't like to talk about it much. In fact, I really try to avoid talking about it because for a long time I decided, first of all, nobody in show business should complain. It's just rule number one.
The moment didn't feel tragic. It just looked like a heated family moment that had spilled out into the open. Only later did everyone understand how heavy it really was. From the second Nick walked in, it was clear he wasn't blending in. While guests mingled, laughed, and filled Conan's place with easy holiday vibes, Nick kept his distance. He didn't warm up by the fireplace, didn't join any of the little groups chatting around the room. He just floated through the space like he was there physically, but somewhere else completely in his mind. At first, his words were scattered, half-thoughts that didn't make much sense. People whispered that maybe he was just anxious or out of place. But then, everything changed. His tone snapped into something sharp and heavy, every word now aimed straight at his dad. The room froze. Guests traded uneasy looks, murmuring things like, "Something's wrong, he's scaring people."
Conan can't get, let
Can't
it
get
go.
over it.
And the thing is, I think
I remember that.
I thought I saw "Let It Go," and I remember thinking, a guest asked me about it on the air.
Yeah, how do I let it go?
And if I talk about it for a second, someone's saying like, "Oh my God, Conan,
I know,
enough
like, shut
already.
up, yeah.
Shut up." And so
Within minutes, the party's warmth vanished. The laughter, music, and glittering lights meant nothing anymore. Because in that moment, one of Hollywood's most admired families was falling apart right before everyone's eyes. For years, Conan O'Brien's Christmas party was like Hollywood's secret safe zone, a rare escape from all the cameras, headlines, and fake smiles. It wasn't just another industry event, it was a refuge. No paparazzi, no phones recording behind people's backs, and definitely no sneaky gossip being traded for clout. Conan protected that space with real intention, giving everyone a night to breathe, a night to just be human again.
America being the last remaining superpower, what would they do with this power in terms of spreading democracy? And they had talked about going into Iraq in the Middle East and figuring out a way to put a Western-style democracy in the Middle East. Hopefully it would proliferate and then, help Israel and spread democracy.
People who'd been there before could still describe it in perfect detail. The air smelled like pine and cinnamon, drinks were poured slow, conversations flowed easy, and laughter felt real, not staged or strategic. It was one of those rare nights when even the biggest stars dropped their guard. For a few hours, it was Hollywood stripped of its masks. But everything changed on December 14th, 2025, because just one day later, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were found dead inside their own home. The news hit like a lightning bolt. Shockwaves tore through the entire industry. Phones lit up, social media exploded, and suddenly all eyes turned toward one name, Nick Reiner.
never made a decision in my career based on money, not once. I'm not going to lie. It's nice to have money.
Right.
But I've also not had money, and I'm okay with that. I really wanted to keep my body of work.
Overnight, that warm holiday memory turned into evidence. Every smile, every word, every look from that night was being replayed like a crime scene in people's minds. Nobody could forget the atmosphere now, not because it was magical, but because everyone was trying to figure out what they'd missed. When Conan finally spoke, he wasn't the witty late-night host anymore. He sounded heavy, cautious, like every word carried the weight of something too real. He said it all began to unravel the exact moment the door opened and Rob Reiner walked in with his wife, Michelle, and their son, Nick. Everyone who was there that night described the same strange feeling. The room didn't suddenly fall silent, nobody gasped, but something definitely shifted, like the warmth had quietly drained out of the air.
We were going to war again based on a lie. And it was just very, very disturbing. And there's a line in the film where James Marsden, who plays Warren Strobel, he says, it feels like you feel like your child is running into the street.
When Rob Reiner walked in, he flashed that familiar Hollywood smile he'd worn for decades, but it barely lasted a second before it disappeared. It wasn't joy, it was habit, like muscle memory trying to hide something deeper. Conan later said Rob didn't look at ease for even a moment. He didn't glide toward old friends or slip into conversation like usual. His eyes kept scanning the room, not like a man soaking in the moment, but like someone sizing it up, reading every detail. He didn't walk in like a guest arriving to celebrate. He came in like someone carrying a burden he couldn't put down. You could see him holding himself together, every move careful, every smile forced, just trying to keep whatever was eating at him under control. But the real tension started to orbit around Nick. While guests huddled into small groups, Nick drifted alone, slow and silent. His eyes moved across people's faces, never settling, like he wasn't looking at people, he was studying them.
Norman Lear was the first person that got me. I mean, I was playing jacks with his daughter. Norman says to my dad, you know, this kid is really funny. My dad said, what, that kid? That kid, he's a sullen. He sits quiet. He doesn't, he's not funny.
Later, several guests said it didn't feel like being looked at. It felt like being analyzed, like Nick was sorting everyone into categories inside his own head that no one else could understand. Then came the moment that froze everyone. Nick stopped right in front of a well-known comedian. No hello, no smile, just two calm questions. Who are you? Are you famous? His tone was flat, emotionless, but that's what made it so unnerving. There was no sarcasm, no aggression, just this eerie calm that made the whole room feel off, like he was trying to strip the meaning out of the night itself. Rob stood there watching, frozen, tense, trying to keep his composure while the room quietly shifted around him. He didn't rush over to stop Nick, but a close friend beside him caught the tiny giveaway, his hand gripping his glass so tight his knuckles turned white. That wasn't irritation anymore, that was fear. The kind of fear a parent feels when love, authority, and even reputation stop working, when nothing they say can reach their own child anymore. As the night went on, the tension that had been building finally broke through the surface. Nick didn't yell or lose control. In fact, that was what made it even more chilling. His voice came out slow, sharp, and deliberate, every word landing like a small explosion in the quiet room. He locked eyes with his father and said, "You're always talking about family values," then paused, his tone flat but cutting. "But everything is already arranged for the people you think deserve it." Rob froze, then answered fast, almost too fast, like he'd been through this exact fight before. Conan later said Rob didn't sound like a filmmaker trying to manage tension. He sounded like a worn-down father repeating himself just to survive the moment. "Nick, this isn't the time," Rob said. "We've already talked about this." But Nick didn't stop. He kept going, his words circling around money, power, and control. He talked about papers, about things being signed behind his back. Guests beneath him whispered later that they heard him bring up a will, decisions, assets, authority, all handed over to people he didn't trust. And then came the line that shattered the entire room, the moment when all sound seemed to disappear. "You're preparing everything for a world without me. You always have." Those words hit like a gut punch. No one in that room truly knew how left out Nick felt, or how much of what he believed was real, but one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't some random outburst. These feelings had been simmering for years, slowly building up until they finally exploded in the most public, painful way imaginable. Michelle tried to step in, reaching out to gently touch Nick's arm, her voice low and trembling. "Nick, not here, please." But when Nick turned toward her, his face went cold, hard enough that Michelle instinctively stepped back. That tiny movement said everything. This was no longer a moment anyone could control. Guests could feel it. The energy in the room had turned heavy, electric, dangerous in a way words couldn't explain. Rob stood there, trying to pull the situation back with reason, but it was useless. His usual calm, his authority, even his warmth, none of it worked anymore. He was just standing there, listening, as every tool he'd ever used as a father stopped working right in front of everyone. Conan later admitted he couldn't remember every word exchanged, but what haunted him was the feeling. He said, "I didn't see a family argument. I saw pressure. Pressure like one person pushing the others into a corner where every possible move felt wrong. It wasn't about shouting or violence. It was psychological, quiet, but crushing."
Nobody in that room stepped in, not because they didn't care, but because nobody knew how. Once that invisible line between parent and child broke in public, there was no way to fix it. The confrontation didn't end with peace or apology. It ended with exhaustion. Nick finally turned away first, leaving Michelle shaken and silent as the whole room seemed to exhale at once. Rob just stood there for a few long seconds, frozen, like he was trying to process what had just happened, to confirm it was real. A close friend quietly stepped up beside him, rested a hand on his shoulder, and that's when Rob leaned in and whispered, barely audible, "I'm scared. I don't know what he'll do next." That moment wasn't filled with anger or irritation. It was pure helplessness. You could feel it, the kind of fear that goes beyond embarrassment or frustration. It was a father's fear. When the Reiner family finally left, nobody followed them out. No hugs, no polite farewells, just silence. The atmosphere stayed heavy long after their footsteps faded down the walkway. One guest later said it felt like watching someone walk out of a brightly lit room into complete darkness, with no idea what was waiting for him on the other side. When Conan later spoke about that moment, he stopped mid-sentence and just sat in silence for a while. His eyes filled up. What hit him hardest, he said, wasn't the argument itself. It was that he had heard that same fear before. After past parties, when the guests had gone home and the laughter died down, Conan and Rob would sometimes sit together in quiet conversation. No audience, no cameras, just two friends. Rob didn't say much most nights, but whenever the topic turned to Nick, his whole voice changed, slower, heavier, careful. He talked about rehab, about glimpses of hope that would appear for a while and then vanish again. There was never anger in his tone, only this quiet, cautious heartbreak, like he was afraid that even one wrong word might push his son further away. That's the fear Conan remembered, not the fear of a celebrity protecting his image, but the raw fear of a father realizing his child was slipping out of reach. Rob once said quietly, almost like he was talking to himself, being a father in this situation is incredibly hard. You want to protect your child, but at some point you realize the final decisions aren't in your hands. So when he whispered, "I'm scared," that Christmas night, it wasn't coming out of nowhere. It was the echo of years of warning signs that had been right there in front of him. They were visible, but too painful for anyone to truly face. Later reports filled in the missing pieces, the parts most outsiders never knew. Nick had battled addiction for years, going through multiple rehab programs that seemed to help for a while before things slipped back again. People close to him said he wasn't just struggling with addiction, he was also dealing with serious mental health challenges and intense emotional swings in the weeks before everything fell apart. Around that same time, doctors had reportedly changed his psychiatric medication, a sensitive transition that experts say can drastically affect mood, perception, and impulse control. Friends and family said Nick had been growing restless and suspicious, convinced that people, even those closest to him, were taking things from him, not just money or assets, but trust, loyalty, and love. The paranoia was spreading through his thoughts like wildfire. Authorities had apparently been called to the Reiner home several times over the years, small arguments that escalated, then cooled off before turning dangerous. Each time, the surface tension faded, but the deeper problem never really went away. After the tragedy, investigators began piecing together Nick's movements with chilling precision. Surveillance footage from a nearby gas station showed him calm, almost eerily calm, buying a drink and chatting politely with the cashier. Experts later said that quiet composure was what made everything more unsettling. It didn't show chaos, it showed control. Reports claimed he traveled by public transportation afterwards. No panic, no rush, just this haunting calm that left everyone wondering what was really going through his mind. Investigators later traced Nick's movements in the days that followed, planned routes, quiet detours, and an eerie effort to stay unnoticed. At one hotel, they found windows covered with bed sheets, the kind of small, strange detail that screamed he knew he was being watched. Even now, not every piece of that timeline can be fully confirmed, but it raised the question that still haunts this entire case. How much control had Nick truly lost, and how much had he been holding on to the whole time? Right now, Nick is being held in a tightly supervised psychiatric unit under constant monitoring. In court, witnesses said he looked completely withdrawn, dressed in a suicide prevention gown, barely speaking except to quietly answer, "Yes, Your Honor." The next hearing has already been postponed, the judge granting more time for mental competency evaluations. To the world, it's just another date on a legal calendar, but to those who loved Rob and Michelle, it's a wound that still refuses to close. What makes this story hit so hard isn't just what happened after that night, it's everything that came before. The tension, the warning signs, the quiet moments everyone brushed off, thinking things would somehow fix themselves. When Conan finally spoke, he didn't expose a Hollywood scandal. He exposed the truth nobody wanted to admit. The signs were there all along, painfully clear, but no one knew how to stop what was already coming. The investigation is still unfolding, leaving the world hanging between facts and heartbreak. But one thing stays chillingly certain. On that Christmas night, inside a home built for laughter and warmth, something dark was already in the air. It wasn't chaos yet, just a quiet, unspoken fear waiting to be recognized. If this story shook you, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments, because this one still leaves everyone asking, how did no one see it coming?